football clubs.
Newcastle United have been playing at St James's Park since before the Football League. They're famous for their loyal and loud fans, but how big are they?
Subscribe now to see how they compare with other big football clubs.
Newcastle United are considered one of England's bigger clubs due to their trophy haul, putting them in 9th place, and their reliable support, which makes them the 4th best supported club in England. If we compare them to other clubs in England, we can find them amongst a number of other clubs who have had success at certain periods. Newcastle of classic vintage.
Newcastle United can be proud of winning 4 league titles and 6 FA Cups. They're yet to win the League Cup, but in their time in European football, they also won the Intercities Fairs Cup.
St James's Park is electric. Fans did not immediately flock to St James's Park in high numbers at the beginning, but with improving league finishes they gradually caught up with clubs in the First Division, just as they were promoted. Crowd numbers were then fairly steady, but when they became a dominant force in England they started getting the highest attendances in the First Division, and it seemed this one city club would always be well supported. After the war, numbers peaked again in 1921, but without seriously challenging for the league title, average attendances started to fall towards just above the top flight average. This changed in 1927 when Newcastle accompanied their league title with the highest numbers in the league, and numbers stayed fairly high even though league form had fallen away. But relegation to the 2nd Division resulted in a fall below the top flight average, although not by a drastic amount. Newcastle got the highest attendances for 3 years running after the war, along with improvement in the league form, and they maintained high numbers during decent league finishes, and an even more successful period as a cup team. Figures stayed above the top flight average until relegation in 1961, when they got to the top flight average, which is not bad since they were struggling. Once back in the First Division, attendances were close to the average, and this did not change much. This was until relegation again, and figures went below the average for a few seasons. This picked up along with promotion again, but by this time fans were not consistently supporting in large numbers. However, we cannot say that average attendances have been very low for Newcastle, even when fighting against relegation to the 3rd Division. The club is fairly well supported even when not at their best. Since making it into the Premier League, Newcastle United have had average attendances comfortably above the top flight average. Stadium developments over time have been met by more fans. When playing in the 2nd Division in 2009-10, this dipped. But a dip to 48,000 spectators is a representative of a very well supported club. When they were in the 2nd Division again in 2016-17, we can hardly see any difference from attendances when they're in the Premier League. Newcastle are clearly one of the best supported clubs in the country and regularly get over 50,000 at home games. We've put on some great shows. We're unable to access vaults of Newcastle's glories from their true glory days, but from the 90s they appeared in some classic encounters. In 1966, Newcastle would have loved to have beaten Manchester United to the title. They needed to get a result at Anfield, and they took part in perhaps the best ever Premier League match. However, the outcome knocked a serious dent into their challenge for the title, and what was their dream was rapidly turning into a nightmare. In the following season, Newcastle challenged for the league again, and the demolition of Manchester United was magic. On a day when Newcastle would have taken 1, they took 5. When Newcastle hosted Barcelona, Faustino Asprilla put on the performance of a lifetime to thrill the St James's Park faithful and make Newcastle's mark on the Champions League in one of the great nights of European football. We've got stars from all over our history. Newcastle's best ever lineup might be made up of a few players from when they were still winning trophies, and perhaps the most naturally gifted English player ever, Paul Gascoigne. We also have players from their championship challenging side from the 90s, such as record scorer and local legend Alan Shearer. We also have the more recent goalkeeper Shay Given. We will keep on challenging. After gaining their place in the second division in 1893, Newcastle United made steady progress to the first division. Their performances there were not bad, and 2 seasons after a close call with relegation, the club won their first league title. This started a period of becoming champions every other year on 3 occasions, and when they did not win the league, they won the FA Cup. United were not so dominant in the years leading up to the First World War, but maintained their place in the First Division. When football returned, Newcastle made top half of the table finishes consistently for the next few years, and in the mid-20s won the FA Cup and another league title. They would then not challenge for the title for some time, falling away in the league and making somewhat of a comeback, including an FA Cup win, before a dramatic fall to the second division. They would spend the rest of the 30s there, at times looking close to relegation and once close to the very bottom of the division. Returning to football again, Newcastle was soon promoted and started off the post-war era with healthy league finishes, but they were not pushing for the title. However, in the 50s managed to win the FA Cup on 3 occasions. But in the 60s they would be relegated again and spend a few seasons there. After they won the second division title, Newcastle managed to stumble their way through a few seasons in the first division until improving at the end of the 60s. This enabled them to enter the Fairs Intercities Cup, which is the only major European trophy to date. In the 1970s, Newcastle were a stable mid-table club again, peaking briefly towards the end of the decade before relegation into the second division. This time they would remain there for 6 seasons, and after 5 seasons back in the top flight, they would go down again, flirting with relegation to the third division at the beginning of the 90s. In a quick turnaround, Newcastle won the second division title at the beginning of the Premier League era, and once in the Premier League they immediately made their way towards the top of the table, finishing strongly in their first season back and coming runners-up twice in the 90s. They were unable to keep up the challenge and drifted down to the bottom half of the table. There was then a gradual decline until relegation, but the club promptly won the second division, and this pattern was then repeated in 2017. And Newcastle have stabilised as a Premier League side. The Magpies may yet soar again. Newcastle were one of the earliest dominant forces in English football and were frequently winning trophies until the 50s. They've since found it a lot harder. They have won the Fairs Cup and played in European competition since, but have never been a serial threat to the European hierarchy. Newcastle fans are famous for their strong support. This was good when they were winning things, but sometimes took a dip when the club was struggling. In recent times, however, their fan base has been even more faithful, and they are guaranteed crowds year after year. United have taken part in some classic matches, and the atmosphere of home matches is a big part of some of their legendary encounters during the most exciting era of attacking football. We cannot say they've had a range of European matches, but bigger clubs have. Newcastle's players can be taken from a range of periods, including that of domination. Although many later players did not win anything at the club, they played with a level of flair that aided the Premier League's reputation for excitement. Newcastle United are well known in England as one of the bigger clubs. What is notable is the imbalance between the popularity of the club and what they've won. The lack of trophies for many decades is perhaps made harder by the pressure of a demanding fan base, but their fans are a massive part of the club's identity and go a long way to make Newcastle United one of England's
big football clubs.
How long can Newcastle go without a trophy before they're no longer considered a big football club?
Please comment below. Like and subscribe to Big Football Clubs to watch videos as they're released each week.